Hi again, everybody. Welcome back to Sports Talk. Doug Miles, Don Henderson with you as we come to you here on a Tuesday night. And we're going to talk some golf tonight. And even though we won't have the Masters, at least in its normal time slot in April, we're going to talk about a great new book about golf. And it's written by a man we've all read, both Don and I, in the New York Post. You read him as a columnist. And his name is Mark Cannizzaro. The name of the book is 7 Days in Augusta, Behind the Scenes at the Masters. And Don, good to welcome Mark Cannizzaro with us tonight. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing great, guys. How you doing?
Well, I'll tell you, it's been an unsettling time, but quite honestly, everybody's sort of settling back now, getting into the flow, and it's very, very good. Happy to see that they are going to have the Kentucky Derby, although it's going to be part of a little bit later in the season and sort of a package deal.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we're hoping the Masters gets rolling, and sometime in the fall. There's some speculation, maybe in October or even Labor Day weekend. So, it hasn't been good timing for me to have a book released on March 17th, a month before the Masters, and then there'd be no Masters, unfortunately. But, for those there's not much else to do but read and watch television. So, I guess maybe I'm going to look at the bright side of that, and maybe people want to read a little bit about the Masters, Masters week when there is no Masters, and hopefully we'll have one down the line.
Yeah, Don and I were talking about that, Mark. I know a lot of books. I know this is published by our friends at Triumph Books. I know some other baseball books are coming out. I wondered if it's, like you said, it could be a blessing in a way that people have a lot more time. They're going to read about it, or does it hurt you a little bit that there's no tournament coming up, and can you push it back? But the book already came out, so I guess it's a moot point.
Yeah, listen, it can't help that there's no Masters next month, but I think that this is a nice time for people to read. The book is out. It's got some pretty cool anecdotes, and I've covered 25 Masters. This would have been my 26th coming up. The next one will be, and I just try to blend a little bit of some offbeat stuff that people don't really see in the when you're watching on television, other broadcasts and stuff. Just a little behind the scenes stuff there. What takes place at the Champions Dinner, for example, what the Butler cabin is like. I did a chapter on the Green Jacket. I did a chapter on John Daly posting up every year with his RV, down the street at Hooters.
Hooters, right?
Yeah. So it's just, I try to make a little bit of a slice of that week. That's not just the great stuff that you see on the golf course, but I've also certainly blended in a lot of the great stuff that I've covered over the years. Tiger winning in '97, certainly Tiger last year, Mickelson's 3. Norman Faldo collapse and whatnot. So that kind of stuff is all in there. But I just try to, I spliced it in with a little bit of kind of slice of life of those 7 days that we're down there every year. And because the interesting thing about Augusta, guys, as you know, is it's, first of all, unless you know somebody who's a member there, you can't play the golf course. That's probably the hardest tee time to get in America or the world. And I believe, as somebody who's covered all sports for years, that's the hardest ticket in sports to get. So most people haven't been down there, so it's a little bit, there's a little bit of a mythical element to the Masters. So I try to bring some people inside.
What you said, you're in a pretty elite group having covered that many Masters in a row. And number two, as I remember it, now I haven't been down a while, but as I remembered it, they gave a select number of writers and so forth an opportunity to play the day after the Masters finished. Do they still do that?
They do that. There's a lottery that they've had. I've been lucky enough to get on a couple of times. I actually the kind of the postscript to the book at the end of the 7 days is an account of mine of the couple of times that I got a chance to play the golf course, kind of a personalized version of, the harrowing experience it was, because I had the shanks my first time and, whatnot. So that was a tough go. But yeah, they do that. And it's interesting the way they do it, actually. If you are chosen, if you're selected in the lottery, you are not allowed to even put your name back into the lottery for 7 years. So that, in theory, that kind of gives everybody a better chance. Because there's only about maybe 4 or 5 foursomes at the most that they'll let out that Monday. So it's not that many writers and media people. So my last time that I was picked was 4 years ago. So I can't even put my name in for 3 years still to try to get back in.
Doug?
I always wondered, are you afraid to like leave a divot? I mean, it's got to be intimidating from that standpoint. You know, your club may chop some of that grass. Somebody's going to give you a dirty look, huh?
Doug, there is an element to that, to be honest with you, because it is so pristine and such amazing shape, and the lies are so tight. You feel like you're ripping somebody's expensive carpet at a dinner or something. When you're taking a swing. So there is an element to that. And certainly the tight lies make it difficult in and of itself. But yeah, I remember the first time doing it. Like I said, I had the shank, so that was really made it a very harrowing experience. But I do remember being really nervous, because you're just assuming that's the only time you're ever going to get a chance to play, and you want to make the most of it. And I've always covered that tournament, and I do this at every course I'm at. If I'm covering a golf tournament, I always look at it about how I would play it, and it just looks like a really inviting golf course to play because the fairways are wide. There's no rough to speak of. It's hard to lose a ball unless you have the shank and you can't get it off the ground like I did that day, and you're putting it in the water. But it just looks like a very inviting place to play, other than the fact that the greens are treacherous and rock hard and undulating. So I think that all of that went into that first time I had a chance to play it, and it didn't work out so well. But in subsequent time, I've actually played 2 other times, and the last time I played was 3 years ago, and I was hitting the ball beautifully, and ended up shooting. I think I shot 83 that day, and it was an amazing experience. And that was an 83 that probably should have been in the 70s, but because I probably 3 and 4 putted a couple greens because they were so difficult. The Sunday pins, by the way, guys, are in place that Monday. So you're playing the same golf course the pros are playing, except you're playing for the members' tees. You're not playing for the back tees.
My grandson has been down the last couple of years, and well, first of all, his best friend is the curator of the museum there.
Oh, it's beautiful.
So he gets a chance to win the Butler cabin and to really, be a big part of what's going on down there when he's there. And the biggest surprise, he said to me, it didn't surprise me as much, but he had never been there to play and never been there to see it till a couple of years ago. He said, you can't imagine the fact of the unevenness of the court, the fact of the hills. You're not hitting a ball all the time on flat ground. When you look at it on television, it looks like everything's flat.
I'd say it's amazing you say that because, one of the chapters I wrote was, one of the early chapters of the book was about, guys' first impressions. I talked to a lot of the tour players about their first impressions. Phil Mickelson wrote the foreword for me, and I've got some really good anecdotes from him. And he, amongst a lot of other people, said the same thing you did. You have no idea how hilly that place is. You think about just if you've been there before for the 18th tee box up to the 18th green. I mean, that is like going up a ski slope, and and it's out of a tight chute, out of the trees, off the tee. It's just a really the TV. That's the one thing TV can never do. It doesn't really give the viewer the real dimensional look at the way it is, and it does look flat.
No 3D on the golf course.
Mark Cannizzaro joining us, New York Post columnist. The name of the book is 7 Days in Augusta, behind the scenes at the Masters. And Mark, the Masters is one of those golf tournaments that the casual golf fan probably, sets their clock by. That's the beginning of spring. That's the one they probably first sit down to watch on TV. And even the casual fan knows some of the names of the holes and some of the great history of it. It's probably the only tournament that has that, because the U.S. Open and the other majors move around for the most part. And you may have some courses that you repeat, but it's 7 or 8 years apart. But the Masters is every year.
It's again interesting you say that, because I thought one of the most spot on quotes that I have in the book, really, because when I was talking to Mickelson about it, and because there's because of what you said, the tournament's there every year. There are reference points. Things happened on these certain holes in certain years that are always a part of history. And that was Phil talked about that. He goes, that's that sets that place apart, because history is made there at the same golf course every year, and you have these reference points about the shot that Saracen hit back in the day before at least I was born, and just right on down the line. I mean, there's just historic moments at certain holes, and things happen. Tiger's chipping on 16, the curling chip shot, with the Vern Lundquist, call. You just can't replicate that at these other tournaments because they're not played in the same venues, And I mean, the British Open moves around to rotas, and I love the British Open, but it's not quite the same. You might not play, Turnberry or St. Andrews for 5 or 10 years, So yeah, there are historical things that happen at those places, but at Augusta, it's every single year, and you just having myself done 25 of them, I could look at every single hole and think about something cool or special or tournament turning that happened on those holes. Spieth putting the ball in the water when he collapsed, a few years ago. Norman on I'm talking about number 12 at Amen Corner. Norman airmailing the green into the azaleas, doing a search and rescue for the ball. They couldn't find it. He's got to do the perp walk all the way back to the other side of Rays Creek and hit onto the green again, and that was in the throes of his collapse in '96.
Oh.
So there's just so many things that you remember. Freddie Couples' ball sitting up on the bank. I mean, we could be on on the phone here for 2 hours talking about all the crazy cool things that happened. So that's the beauty of the tournament, and because it's just it's the same place every year. So history's made every year at that same venue. Not to mention the fact that it's one of the most amazing golf courses on the planet.
Well, everybody always brings up all the all the great points that you said, Norman, and all the things that focus right in. How about a couple of things that stand out in your mind where it surprised you? You weren't expecting something like this to happen. Maybe not necessarily negative 100%, but something you really didn't think was going to happen, and it happened.
Well, I would say the one that stands out the most, to be honest with you, is I was following Spieth the year he collapsed, and
Spieth?
I mean Jordan Spieth.
Okay.
And he was cruising along that front nine. I'll never forget. In fact, interestingly, I left him after the 8th hole because he had like a 4-5 shot lead. I can't remember what the number was at the time. And I'm like, I got to go back in and start writing because this is done. This is over with. So I went back into the media center and plunked down on my computer. And then when there's TV monitors everywhere in the media center, and all of a sudden you saw the wheels come off, and for a guy that has had so much success on that golf course, it was staggering to see that happen to him, And Rory Mcilroy the same way. I mean, who would have thought? I mean, Rory was had the world by the scruff of the neck. And, he hits that ball way left on 10 that year. And it was just, I mean, he went around and, I mean, he literally was going around that back nine like I felt like I did back when I first played it and had the shanks. I mean, I was afraid of every golf club in my bag. I was afraid to draw a club out of my bag. And that's the way Rory looked on the back nine. And the one thing I will say, too, while talking about that, these aren't golf shots that I remember, but the way that Greg Norman conducted himself after that collapse in '96, and the way Rory did similarly, when he collapsed on the back nine, those the classy and composed way that those guys handled such adverse situations in such a public, arena will always be seared in my memory. The only other thing I can remember that is even close to that is when I covered the British Open in 1999 when John van de Velde collapsed.
Oh, sure.
That famous collapse of the British Open at Carnoustie. And he was, I mean, I think he was in a state of shock when it was over, but he was humorous, he was classy, he had perspective. And I remember all of those things, maybe not the humorous part with Norman, but he was just so classy. And the same thing with Rory. When you looked at Rory, you're like, God, this guy's 20 whatever years old at the time. How could this guy possibly be so mature? And for Norman, for all of the heartbreak he's had at that golf course in that tournament, and it's to me it's criminal that he never won that tournament, because if the golf gods were paying attention, he should have won one of those Masters, and it's a shame that he didn't.
Yeah.
Doug?
Don and I have both covered different golf tournaments. I know, Don, you've covered a lot of the U.S. Opens and up by you in the Philadelphia, New York area. I've had a chance here to cover the Valspar in Tampa and some of the senior events we used to have here in Sarasota. It's a different kind of way of covering sports, Mark, as you know well. You're not in the press box. You decide, I guess, what holes you want to walk. What's kind of been your modus operandi of covering the Masters? Do you follow one particular group? Do you try and change it up every day, or how do you go about it?
Doug, it kind of varies. I'm somebody who likes to be out on the golf course because I like to kind of feel the energy out there and see what's going on, and you pick up little tidbits of color. The one thing that's difficult about the Masters, and I'm going to sound like a spoiled person, spoiled sports writer when I say this, but it's the one professional golf tournament where the media is not permitted inside the ropes. And we cover British Open, U.S. Open, PGA, and any tour event. We have access to inside the ropes, and you always make sure you're not standing in front of spectators and whatnot. You be respectful of that. But when you cover something like that, you're like on the tee boxes, on the edge of the greens. You're close to the players, and you can pick up conversations, little tidbits, and things like that. That I love the color of that, and to incorporate that into my reporting, and my writing. And that's really difficult to do at Augusta because we're pretty much just outside where the general public is, the fans. Now, they do have certain spots and grandstands that are at the top of grandstands that are reserved for the media, but that doesn't allow us to get that close. So it's a tactical way of going about things at Augusta. You have to kind of, especially like on a Sunday, for example, you have to kind of, I like to try to get ahead of groups that I'm covering rather than, it's just like for a Tiger or a Phil, for example, everybody's following these guys. So there's, they're 15 deep behind the ropes, so it's hard to see much, So I try to get ahead a little bit and, maybe work a hole ahead so they're coming to me. But that said, Augusta, and, another element to the Masters, the media center. Have either of you guys been in the media centers over the years?
I have not been in the media center, no.
Well, the media center they had until 3 or 4 years ago, they've just built up a new one, but they're state of the art. I mean, it's literally like these incredible, like the highest tech, university lecture halls type thing. So it was like an amphitheater with, you've got, but now what they've done now is they've built a new media center, which is behind the practice facility, behind the practice green, practice driving range, I should say. This place is a gigantic, it is millions and millions and millions of dollars they spent on this thing. It looks like the most elaborate clubhouse you've ever stepped foot into. And that's our media center. There's a full restaurant in there. I literally have a spot. I have a seat, like a spot, with a brass nameplate with my name on it, my newspaper, that is my spot every time I go there. And there's like two or three video screens that are just at my workstation.
Wow!
I can literally watch. I can watch from my spot. I can watch every single hole, what's going on, and all 18 holes. I can click to a channel where I can see what's going on in the interview room area. So it's really fascinating the technology that they brought into play here now. It's very, very easy not to go out on the golf course and just cover it from the media center, which frankly I think is what the Augusta Green Jackets would prefer anyway. I think they'd rather us all in there, and I think there was a method to their madness of making such an elaborate place. But I do like to get out on the golf course as much as I can.
2 points that people bring out all the time, and I have to agree with it, is the cost of product. You want to get a soda, you want to get it's not like going to any other venue in the country when you're reaching in your pocket to pull out money to pay for something to eat. And number two, has Spieth ever really recovered from those balls in the water? It just seems like he's changed his swing, he's changed this, he's done a million things, but he just doesn't seem to be the same guy that he was before he did that.
I'll address the first thing first. That's the amazing thing about Augusta. They don't gouge on the prices there.
Exactly.
The merchandise, the food. I think it's maybe $1.50 for a pimento cheese sandwich or an egg salad or whatever. And even the merchandise, they do not they don't gouge on it.
Stadium and spend $12 for a hot dog.
Oh my God, yeah, $15 a beer or whatever it is. So maybe more. That's a very a charming element to the Masters. Listen, these guys make more money than we can possibly imagine So that's kind of the beauty of it. They don't even gouge it. Here's another interesting thing now. Like you probably, and I address it in the book. They basically, the Augusta National, they basically bought out hundreds of acres next to the property, blew out like thousands of houses, hundreds of houses, and they have like 300 acres that used to be neighborhoods. They basically tore the houses down, and all it is just vast open space of grass.
Well, if I can interrupt you for a second, though, that neighborhood wasn't great.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible either. You know what I'm saying? It was not. It wasn't like the hood. I mean, it was. It wasn't high end, but my point is they blew all those houses out so they could use it for parking for 1 week a year, and. The amazing thing is they don't charge for parking. The parking's free. Now,
right.
Wow.
What sporting event have you gone to that there's free parking? And
Saratoga.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's all right. So, but you can count them on one hand, probably a big event. And
Right.
this is the biggest event in the sport of golf, and one of the biggest events in sports in period. And if those people at Augusta were charging $15 or $20 to park for each of those spots, people would be peeling 20s off without batting an eye. So my point is, these guys could make so much more money than they already have, which is staggering from the start, and they don't. So that's another part of the element where they don't really gouge. Now to the Spieth thing, I kind of agree with you a little bit. I think Spieth spent a lot of time tinkering. The only thing is he has won a British Open since that. Since that collapse, so it's hard to say. And he had some, as you remember, he had some very difficult moments at that British, trying to take it home. On the 13th hole there,
half-hour hole there, right?
Yeah, I was right. I was right there. I was on foot. I was right behind him when he hit that tee shot on the tee box, and he just immediately said it was 4 right, and we had no idea how right it was at that time. But yes, I think in general, he hasn't really been the same since then. And I just
take
think
him credit for it. He knows the rule, and that hole that you're talking about is a perfect example.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It took a half hour to play, but it took a half hour to play because he really knows the rules and implemented it to the best of his ability.
He absolutely did. I think it's a little too simplistic to point to his struggles of late to that collapse at Augusta. It clearly had an effect on him. There's no question about it. Maybe not trusting his swing or whatever, because he is a tinkerer, and I find he probably tinkers too much for his own good, in my opinion. Now, I'm not a professional golfer, but I just think he thinks too much a little bit, and subsequently he really has been struggling. And the last time he won was that British Open, so
right.
And he's really, really been struggling.
Name of the book is 7 Days in Augusta, Behind the Scenes at the Masters, and Triumph Books is the publisher. Our friends there, great sports books, and we've been talking with New York Post columnist Mark Cannizzaro. I got to ask you one more question before I let you go, Mark. Not a golf-related question, but I read your column today in the Post. Of course, the big news down here: people expecting Tom Brady to come to Tampa. That may be announced tomorrow. You had a column on that today. Any updates on that?
Well, nobody really knows but Brady and his people closest to him. But the interesting thing is Philip Rivers. I actually thought a great spot for Brady would be in Indianapolis with Frank Reich, and they've got a great offensive line there. They've got some skill position players, but for whatever reason, that was never really in play. And they have gone now and signed Philip Rivers to a 1-year extension today. So a 1-year contract. So really, the options for Brady are not. Listen, that's kind of weird to say because he should be able to play where, I would think any team would want him. But it seems like the options are pretty much the Chargers and the Buccaneers. I know some people have speculated that maybe Miami behind the scenes might be in play. But I think Tampa would be a fascinating spot for him because I'm a big fan of the coach there, and he's a great quarterback guy. He's a great offensive mind. And I just think. Yeah, I think it would be a good fit.
I go all the way back with Bruce back at Temple. I was doing their games many, many years ago in Philadelphia. And so I worked with Bruce for a lot of years before he started to make the run around the National Football League. And
he is a wonderful man. He's a wonderful man.
When they did the 2020, I'm not a great believer in some of these things, but when he did the 2020, I don't know if you had a chance to see it on ESPN. It showed just exactly what he's like. I mean, it showed him on the boat, showed him talking about his wife, and he promised her, "This is it. I'm not going to coach anymore." All the things that he went into, that's Bruce Arians.
Well, here's the interesting element, I think, here with the Brady situation. Brady has been as great as he's been, and maybe the greatest quarterback of all time. When you play under Bill Belichick, and I've talked to a lot of players who've left that system and gone to another. Damian Woody was one guy who was an offensive lineman for the Patriots and went to the Jets, and he talked about what a relief it was to get out of that atmosphere, because there's always a thumb on the back of your neck in that kind of atmosphere there.
Sure.
Now that said, they win championships. So it's not really enjoyable along the way, the process. The joy comes at the end result. And so I think Brady, from all the things I've read about and people I've talked to, it just sounds like Brady, he wanted to get away from that atmosphere and get into a little bit of a place, where he's loved, and not that he wasn't loved in New England, but maybe just a new, fresh place. And what better place than Tampa with Bruce Arians, with the attitude that Bruce has? I honestly couldn't think of a coach I'd rather play for more than Arians, to be honest with you.
Well, certainly has a better offensive line than it had the last few years, because
they'll need that. They'll need that.
He doesn't
absolutely.
have that kind of mobility. When he gets down here, he was protected all those 20 years up there in New England, but we better see what happens to him down here in Tampa, because it's not the easiest offensive line to work with.
No, he'll need that, and that's why I thought Indy was going to be a good spot for him, because they have that in place already, and I think even the Chargers have got a better offensive line than what the Buccaneers have, but. It'll be interesting to see. I really don't know, what's going to happen.
But it's certainly a lot of money to spend. They spent it on Bennett.
Yeah.
They gave him they put the tag on him, but it's going to be a long-term contract, right around $40 million by the time they actually get it settled. They put the tag on him. So I think they have $79 million total. They're going to have to give Brady a lot. Boy, I'll tell you, a 43-year-old guy, and you better have that line, or it's not going to be a very happy ending for him, I don't think.
I agree. Listen, I think it's one of the most fascinating subplots we've had to an NFL season in as long as I can remember. I just like the column I wrote today, part of it was just, was it Bill Belichick or was it Brady? Obviously the answer is it was a combination of them, but what's going to happen? Say Brady goes down to Tampa and they go 12-4 and go to the NFC Championship game, and Belichick without Brady goes 8-8 and doesn't make the playoffs. You know what I mean? There's just so many things. Or maybe Belichick goes 13-3 without Brady, right? And then Brady goes 8-8 in Tampa or Los Angeles or something like that. And everybody will say, "Oh, well, it was Belichick all along." It's just so many cool elements to once we get going with the football season.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see it.
I don't care what sport you're talking about. 43 is 43.
It's going to be fun to watch, isn't it?
I'm looking forward to it, because we see. Let's say I'm down here half the year, so I see, many of the games here in Tampa as I see of the Philadelphia Eagles, or I'm from Philadelphia, so I worked with the Eagles for so many years. But I'll see how it makes out firsthand if he comes here.
Well, I'm fascinated to see how it all transpires once all the dominoes, fall and the pieces on the chessboard fall into place. There's still much to happen in this off season.
Doug, we're almost out of time, and you said, let me just throw one last question out, and that is, you guys have really gone into your own, not radio, but
digital.
The word now.
Digital.
Yeah. You're really going. The paper is really going. The Giants, the Jets.
Digital.
Digital. Yeah.
Everybody has their own.
Yeah. Well, listen. That's the. You guys are old school. I'm old school too. Maybe not as old school as you guys are, but that's the way of the world now. It's all about the people that are reading our stories are reading it mostly online. They're not reading the newspaper.
Right.
And that's just the way it is. So, that's.
I was talking more about podcast. That's the word I was trying to think.
Oh yeah, no, we just started that this year actually.
I had the wrong term.
You got a Ranger podcast, a Jet podcast. You got a bunch of them. Very good.
Oh, everybody.
Yeah, Jets, Giants, Yankees, Mets, Rangers, Knicks. It's that's the way of the world now. People are. in their cars, or whatever, wherever they are, they may sit in their office. They want to just put the headphones on and listen to a podcast instead of doing the work, work or whatever. But, listen, we're all about any way we can get to the people. It's like this book, I want people to read the book. You can get it on Amazon. You can go to your local bookstore, your independent bookstores, things like that. Any way we can reach them. This book is digital. It also, there's a narrated version of it, so you can sit and you can drive your car and listen to the narrated version of the book if you prefer that. So it's the same way with the newspaper, man. We're just trying to get to as many people as we can,
no
many eyeballs as possible.
Doug, I'll let you wrap it all up, and I'll just say thank you very, very much. It was a very delightful period of time. I don't know exactly how many minutes we put into it, but thank you so very, very much. Learned a lot. Talked about a lot of things that we've seen over the years, and I really enjoyed the opportunity to sit down and chat with you.
Guys, thanks for having me on. I very much appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark. Mark Cannizzaro, New York Post, and 7 Days in Augusta is the name of the book. Triumph Books is the publisher. And Mark, we'll do it again. Hopefully we'll have the Masters sometime in the fall. We'll have you on around that time.
Anytime, guys. You got my numbers. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Mark Cannizzaro joining us. And Don, before we wrap it up, just got a minute or so to go. You mentioned at the top of the show, we talked about, Mark, the Masters may be in August and in October, depending if they can find an open week. But the Triple Crown has been scheduled, at least right now, Derby on September 5th. And then, of course, I guess they'll follow the 2 weeks to the Preakness. And then the Belmont will be sometime in October in New York. And I think that might make it kind of interesting. Different weather. Could be cold in October. Who knows? But it'll be kind of interesting.
Well, that's pretty much the projected line that they have right now. So we'll just have to wait to see whether it actually develops. As the president said today in his press conference, we really can't put a timeline on anything right now. We're hoping that this happens. We're hoping that happens.
Right.
But we don't know that it's going to happen. So
right.
The baseball season is starting in the middle of May now. Maybe. The Kentucky Derby, maybe. All we can do is hope for the best. Hope they come up with, and I hope some of the Millennium youngsters try to adhere to the rules and regulations that they're trying to put forth, because right now, from all accounts, they think they're indestructible, as they said on television today, and they can still gather 50 and 100 and whatever, and it's just not going to work if they do that.
Yeah, well, I think it's going to be a little, frustrating, obviously, annoying, and hopefully, if anybody gets this, they won't be too serious. But I think out of this is going to come some good things, and I'm going with that.
I'm with you. I listen. I give the president all the credit in the world. He put together a task force. I don't know that they're going to work the way everybody hopes they're going to work. But he certainly has done everything that's humanly possible from
no doubt.
his vantage point. And I'm not a political analyst or anything like that. But he's been on television. Today it was on answered every question of every reporter. There was no anybody antagonizing anybody. And he even said, he's worked so well now with the Democrats and Republicans at this particular juncture, which is wonderful. I just don't think there's anything he could do with it more than he's doing.
Nope, I don't see it either. And, of course, we will try as we continue to do our show. We'll have several authors on. I know we have some in the works with our friends at Triumph. So even though there's no games to talk about, we've got some great books coming out. I know a baseball book, a couple of them, and we'll talk about that in the coming weeks. But I know Pete the Prophet, I emailed him today, Don. He wants to come on and talk some horse racing, so maybe we'll do that in the next week.
Well, there's so much news in horse racing right now. That doping scandal, number one.
Huge, yeah.
Pete the Prophet he's right there at Aqueduct, and Aqueduct's coming right now to the end, even though they're going to have racing at Aqueduct now, as you well know, with no fans in
Nobody there. I saw that Saturday.
I don't know how they're going to do that. All off-track betting.
I saw that Saturday. I got a thing on my phone. He said, click here, and they're giving it away. You used to have to pay for the service to watch it on your phone or TV. They're giving it away for free now, but it's weird. There's no fans in the stands. Very strange.
No fans. So there's no tote boards.
But you can bet at home. You could bet at home for years. You can bet on your phone now. So that they're going to be selling a lot of those, not selling, but signing up a lot of people to do that, I imagine. If you're a horse fan, that's what you're going to do. Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, there aren't many horse fans left, but we keep talking about it. We still have an interest.
So we'll keep with that. But Don, I know as we live here in a beautiful part of the world this time of year, we usually do a lot of the fun things like the jazz festival, the film festival, and the fair, all canceled. So we gotta read books, and we'll read Mark's book.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's been a disaster for everybody all around the world. And as I said, let's just hope we come out at the other end in good shape.
Great. Don, thank you, and thank you all for listening, and we will see you again real soon.
Maybe.